So this is 5 GMT on Sunday, the 9th of August 2020. We are continuing with the anti-migrant war declared by the daughter of a migrant, Priti Patel, who is in post as the Home Secretary in the UK, in the regime fronted by Boris Johnson and controlled by Dominic Cummings. And this is the poem called Daridro, written by the national poet of Bangladesh, but he wrote this long before he was given that honor or recognition. He Daridro, tumi more korecho mohan, tumi more daniacho Krishter সম্মান, কণ্টক মুকুট শোভা দিয়াছ তাপস, অসংকোচ প্রকাশের দুরন্ত সাহস, উদ্যত উলঙ্গ দৃষ্টি বাণী ক্ষুরোদ্বার, বাণী মোর সাপে তব হল তরবার, দুঃসহ দাহনে তব হে দর্পিণী তাহস, অম্লান স্বর্গেরে মোর করিলে বিরস, অকালে সুকালে মোর রূপ রস প্রাণ, শীর্ণ করপুট ভরি সুন্দরের দান. Now we shall be talking about poverty, daridro, written by Qazi Nazrul Islam. He wrote this about the time he wrote The Rebel, He Bidruhi. So the Bidruhi and the Daridro and the other powerful universal humanitarian poems and the collection of poetry that Nazrul is known for as the rebel poet and the rebel poetry came from the heart, from the experience, from the reality that he was witnessing and experiencing and observing. And the ideas contained in those poems are universally applicable. They are not confined to the surroundings of his upbringing, the village Churulia in the Burdhaman district in the West Bengal province of India today, but they are transcending provincial, national, territorial bounds and limitations. So he was comparing himself with the Christ. He was thinking, presenting, and writing and appearing as the person going through poverty. And in that position, he imagined himself to be in a position where he was addressing the attacker or the violator or the phenomenon of poverty that he was experiencing going through. And instead of being cowed down, he was defiant in that state of being poor and in poverty. So he defied poverty and rose above not only the local, immediate, individual, personal poverty that he was going through, but he went beyond and transcended the time. And he went back to the time of the suffering that has been perceived and portrayed as having been suffered by the prophet Jesus Christ by the Christians. Of course, that particular portrait is different in the actual interpretation and narration that is contained in the Islamic faith for the devout believers in Islam, but he was not making that distinction. Nazrul Islam was treating the image of Christ as if it was beyond controversy and as if it symbolized the victim that the believers in Christianity as widely understood and promoted and presented went through. And the honor, the respect, and the honor of Christ that Nazrul claims for himself in that state of being in poverty is the essence of that particular poem. That all the violations, all the denials, all the deprivations that poverty inflicts and imposes on the person in poverty, he's defying all of those, and he's saying that he's above the limitations that are experienced by ordinary mortals. He was not saying he was not an ordinary mortal. He just leapt and skipped the various stages, and he said, pronounced himself as being honored by poverty, not being violated by poverty. So that is the reversing of the material condition that poverty represents. And Nazrul rose above that and defied that and challenged poverty. So he said, He Daridro. He was confronting poverty as if it was an entity, a person, a material being somewhere right in front of him, or within reach, or within hearing of him. And he's shouting the challenge of defiance to poverty and saying, He Daridro. Not only have you failed, and he skipped that, and went to Tumi more korecho mahan. He said that you have made me magnificent. O Daridro, hey poverty, O poverty, you have made me magnificent. You have given me the honor of Christ. And then he goes on about the decorations. All the decorations, he goes, then Kontok, Mukut, Shava, Diasotaposh, Oshankuch, Prakasher, Durunto Sahosh. Now, Oshankuch, the Bengali word, the Bangla word, Oshankuch means unhesitating or unhesitant, unrestrained, without any hesitation, without any restraint, without any pause, and without any limitations on the speaker. And he says, he's assuming himself as the, and continuing as the speaker, Oshankuch Prakasher Duranto Sahosh. Duranto means it is unlimited again, infinite. Sahosh is courage. So he's saying that poverty has conferred on him that courage, unlimited courage, to Oshankuch Prakasha, to express, to declare, to proclaim, to announce the truth of the position. Oshankuch Prakasher Duranto Sahosh. Duranto means unafraid, unscared. Uddoto ulongo drishti bani kurodar. Uddoto ulongo drishti bani kurodar. He's saying that he's absolutely poised to attack the target of his program of action, of defiance. That is obviously implying that all the forces of poverty, or all the forces combined in poverty, he is treating them as his target, collective target. And Ulongo Drishti, and he's saying that his eyes, his stare, his look on his face, on his eyes, are absolutely naked, raw, and unrestrained and unlimited. And Bani Khurodar. Khur means knife, very sharp knife. Bani Khurodar is the Bani, his message, his statement is as sharp as the sharpest knife. So, this is Nazrul Banimor shape tobe holo torbar. Now, poverty is obviously a curse. So he's saying that you, the curse, you have in fact turned my message, my response, my statement as powerful as a sword. Instead of cowing me, instead of putting me down, you have enabled me to have the message of defiance against you, poverty, which is as powerful and as sharp as a sword. So once again, those 6 lines, He Daridro, তুমি মোরে করেছ মহান, তুমি মোরে দানিয়াছ খ্রিস্টের সম্মান, কণ্টক মুকুট শোভা দিয়াছ তাপস, অসংকোচ প্রকাশের দুরন্ত সাহস, উদ্যত উলঙ্গ দৃষ্টি, বাণী ক্ষুরদার, বাণী মোর সাপে হলো, বাণী মোর সাপে তব হলো তরবার. And this is the message that I want to convey and state to the likes of Priti Patel that the people who are collectively being condemned by Priti Patel and her script writers and agenda setters in the Home Office or in the regime fronted by Boris Johnson and buoyed up by the subsidiary but persistent hate preachers like Nigel Farage and others in the media like the Daily Mail, which is helping to write the script and interpret the script as effectively, as hatefully as they can. So these writers and script writers and agenda setters and attackers of the migrants must understand that the spiritual resource and the wealth of the soul and the mind and the heart and the culture and the belief and the faith is made of contributions like that left behind by the rebel poet Qazi Nazrul Islam, who compared the poor, the victims of poverty and hunger, with the prophet of the Christian faith, as understood by the Christian faith and as represented by them in the narrative. And that Priti Patel or any of the others, when they treat the migrants as if the migrants are not only not human, but below humanity level, must not underestimate the possibility, the potential of defiance against them by the migrants. The migrants do contain people with such spiritual resource and reserve and tradition. And if the migrants and their community, to put it in that way, community of migrants were to rhetorically get together and assert themselves as being equivalent to the position occupied by Jesus Christ, being magnificent, then Priti Patel and all her colluders will crumble. And they will crumble as edifice of lies and denials of humanity and compassion, defying, made of, built on a denial of the message of Christ. That is, in their culture, in the culture of the people who treat Jesus Christ as their prophet and their source of all the positive inspiration. So Priti Patel is defying the legacy, the message, the identity, the profile of Jesus Christ himself. as predicted by Qazi Nazrul Islam 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And Priti Patel must not rule out the possibility that the people she is condemning and damning and consigning as mere migrants are bigger than she can ever possibly comprehend. And He Daridro, Tumi More Korecho Mohan, this poverty, you have made me magnificent, is the message that if the people can understand and comprehend the various factors causing poverty, making people poor, that they can turn the complete edifice down and break it. Like all these statues of slavers and slave owners that are being felled in the wake of the murder of the black man in America by strangulation by the racist police. The edifice of the likes of Priti Patel will come crumbling down in the face of the angry rejection of the people in poverty who are magnificent, made magnificent by poverty. The endurance is a defiance of the injustice imposed on them, and the injustice is the poverty that has been created deliberately, intentionally created. Poverty is not a state of natural being or is not a cause of natural being, natural causes. Poverty is created in a relatively unfair equation, and poverty for one is created by the other, intentionally robbing the one of their share. And the share is the common resource, the commonwealth of nature, the commonwealth of the planet. And so the poverty is not local, just local. It is local, regional, national, international, universal. So the universal justice, the fight for universal justice, and the fight for universal share for everyone in the basic necessities of human life and condition is the fight that Nazrul leads with that kind of poetry. And that kind of elevation of the target of poverty to the highest status possible in the narrative of the last 2000 years. And that is why the response to the likes of Priti Patel and all her pumpers of the program of hatred is the spiritual, literary, cultural, social, historic, poetic response, and enabled by the reality of the resources that are available in the storehouses and the storages of the communities from which these people are having to flee to escape poverty. So they are not poor. They are being deliberately made poor in their countries, in the regions, in the localities, and they are being kept in poverty of status even when they arrive in the destinations. And so therefore this is not a real loss of status. It is an unreal, unfair, unjust, unnecessary, avoidable loss of status of equal human being and dignified human being. And that is asserted by the victims and the targets and the robbed and the deprived, asserting that poverty has made them, us, magnificent and given the honor, the highest honor conferred to the highest personality in the narrative of the Christian world. That is the dominant world, the imperialist world as it was then and as it still is. So, O poverty, you have given me the honor of Christ. You have made me magnificent. And oh, Priti Patel, you have condemned yourself and condemned the regime, the people that you supposedly speak for, to the lowest possible level, the most depraved possible level, by depriving us of the honor that we assert by tracing the history of the victims, going back to the victim that you worship by relationship with the people who control the culture. As the victim, he was the highest possible defier of injustice. And he showed two fingers to injustice, to poverty, and all the other things that came with poverty.